somebody reminded me of something. To make this perfectly effective, I need to fill this cavity to the top with insulation. So I am backtracking, and I do have some fiberglass insulation that I got. Actually, I have some. I don't have to use this. This guy got this to use in my chicken coop. And now that I'm thinking of it, I have a roll of good unused stuff. This is the stuff I got for free. I might have enough left over for my camper repairs. I'm going to lay that in the outer edges of this all the way around to fill the cavity and increase the overall insulation of my tiny house. Now I was just about to lay that in there and I realized I have a little bit, so let me go grab that. Forgot I had this. Again, this is just in the outer edges to ensure that this is filled, that the cavities are full. Actually, I think I'll end up using all of my new stuff and then some. I've got 2 partial rolls. Okay, now that'll guarantee full insulation. Now it's a tiny bit more. I've got 2 3.5 inch thick stacks of insulation, but the fiberglass compresses easier, which is the less valuable to me. It's just a filler in this case. So I'm just going to push it down in there and that'll fill that gap under the floor. And it'll also lock anything in place. That'll lock up against the rock wall and there won't be any shifting of this insulation down here if I ever did have to drive this trailer down the road. So I'm just going to continue on and do all that so I don't forget for later like I started out forgetting. I have to rip this floorboard in half to fit onto here in this section. So what I've done is marked it out in that 1/2 at 24 inches, which is a halfway mark, and I am using, because I don't have my table saw hooked up right now, I'm going to get some clamps and use this board as a guide. I'm going to flip it over. This board is going to be a guide for my saw. I gotta get 2 C-clamps, I'll be right back. Always something else you need here and there. Now, since I don't have my table saw running and I have to rip this long board with a handheld saw which I need a battery for. I also don't have a proper workbench big enough for this. If somebody zoom out, I have taken this board and laid it on my deck, which is flat, and I have propped it up with enough boards on both sides so that I can rip this through the middle and they'll support themselves. Because there's otherwise no way I'm going to cut this alone out here. Now, because I want to keep my cut nice and straight, and I'm not very good with a handheld saw, I've measured the distance from the saw blade to the edge of the guide, which is 1 inch. And first I marked my line at 24 inches, which is where I want the cut to be. But then I moved my guide board over 1 inch so that when I start my cut, this blade is going to be right on, actually the edge of that guide is going to be right on. So my blade is going to be cutting just to the right side of that a tiny bit. And I could actually tweak this and knock it over just a fraction because I want that cut to be dead center on that line. So I might do that. And when you're doing your measurements, where you see the line and where the line really is sometimes a little bit different because the board is rounded on the edge. So I've got to tap that over just a tiny bit. So I've got this cut right down the center. So I'm going to do that and put my battery in my saw, and I'm going to rip this long board in half. Alright, well, I'm going to try to rip this through. I'm going to have to actually crawl on it as I go. So, yeah, so I have to make sure that's supported well underneath. I'll literally be crawling on this board as I go along. That's why I keep these little blocks of cut off ends all the time. They're useful for so many projects while you're working. Alright, here we go. The shield is actually throwing me off, isn't that funny? Okay. There it is. Should be a good cut. I checked the edge of this board for straightness by lining it up with my measurements before I went and did this. I put my 24-inch line on here all the way across. I drew a line all the way across. Or so I measured all the way across and put marks on the board. Then I laid this long one down on there and lined it up with the marks, and it lined up, so I knew I had a straight edge to work with on this long board that I just used as a table saw guide in a way. So you have to make sure you have a straight board to begin with, and then I used the edge without blemishes. This edge had blemishes, that's why you saw me flip this whole thing and turn it over. And that gives you a nice, perfect straight cut all the way down your sheet of plywood. And that's how you cut out in the field, by supporting your board with whatever you've got. It's got to be just equal sized pieces of wood underneath on both sides so that it'll hold itself up, and you can go ahead and make your cut. Make a nice even cut. Now I'm going to dry fit everything this time. This piece I'll use for another place later on. Put him aside. So that should be my end piece over here now. The outside edge. Ooh, force that lip. We'll line that up later. I've also been studying about square, so before I do anything here, because when I built this I made sure it was square. When I put the aluminum on I made sure it was square. When I put it on the trailer something shifted. Because what's weird is when I'm looking at this here now, it's not exactly lined up anymore the way it should be. So something shifted when I mounted this up on the trailer. So I have to double check my square before I screw any boards down. That's just going to sit there for now as I go on and continue cutting my boards to fit. And as I said, before I'm done, before I screw down any more boards, I found out a technique. Actually, my friend Reese suggested this, which I'll probably be doing later, because as soon as I cut these other two boards here in the middle, or I should say three boards, I'm going to cut the middle boards to fit. Then I'm going to bolt these two halves together, and then I'm going to secure that to the frame of the trailer, and then I'm going to make sure everything is square together. And what my friend Reese said to do is to square this down. You put a screw in one end and a screw in the opposite end, and you can use a what do you call those, ratchet strap, to pull the corners that are off in and back into square, and then you can bolt down or screw down your floorboards, and that should hold everything in place. And I'm probably going to have to put some torque on this as well, because I'm starting to think the trailer frame itself is out of square through the years, because up here I squared this off and lined it up perfectly well with the front of the trailer frame, but back here is not lined up. So something shifted somewhere, and I still have to figure that out. It's a little bit frustrating. So I'll be rechecking my level and everything else before I put any more boards on permanently. So just wanted to explain that. Today I'm just cutting the boards and preparing them. Trying to line these two halves up together with one another so that I can make these two units into one. This clamp is because when I push on one side, the other side moves, so it's quite frustrating. Okay, that'll line up. Now, undo the clamp. I got it straight. Now what I want to do is release the pressure here. And I've got some liquid nails. I need to back this off a little, scoop it up nicely, and then put the two together. Trying to put on a very generous amount of glue. When I screw these two together, the two will become as one. Want to use the last this half tube here. One tube of liquid nails doesn't go very far. Push these back together. Close. this way. This is awkward. Well, I won't bore you with my lining this up. It's going to take some maneuvering, and I'm going to line that up precisely and then clamp it in place before I screw it down. But I've got them lined up. Misplaced my screwdriver in. Well, I'm going to screw these together. Here we go. Making the two into one piece. The Tiny House Builder's book that I read actually show making your house in 3 pieces as you go. That's interesting. They build their frame in 3 parts to make it easier to work with. Another bug went down my throat. Oh my. Why do they do that? Humid, so I gotta keep pulling my pant legs up before as I move. I used to rip the knees out of my jeans. I learned to pull my pant legs up when I move, so you probably see it a lot. Alright, I'm gonna screw this all together.